Excellent. Just one second. Showing that your microphone's muted. There you
Sorry.
are. Yeah, perfect. Thanks for joining.
Sure.
Okay, just one second. We're going live now. Let me check out what's happening on LinkedIn and YouTube. All right, one moment. Okay, cool. All right. All right, so yeah, thanks for being a part of this first time. We'll see how it goes. If people are quiet, not asking a lot of questions, we'll run it like a podcast. We'll get some really good information that can be educational, inspirational to people in the community. And yeah, we'll see what happens. I really appreciate
Okay.
you being a part of this
Sure.
and helping us get it going.
Sure.
Awesome. Hello, William. Glad to have you here. Those of you on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Twitch, if you have questions for Parisa, please use the text chat to post those questions. You can also share what you're working on, and I'll relay everything to Parisa, and we'll get into it and see how we can help. Parisa, please introduce yourself.
Parisa Khosropour. I'm currently serving as the president of Techos Angels in LA. My background is in device diagnostic and life sciences. I worked over 30 years in the industry and retired in 2019. Sort of decided to go back to my roots, which was startup. I started my career in a startup and was one of those successful startups that was acquired and expanded and grew. So now I mentor, advise, and invest in the sort of startup ecosystem. That's a little bit about it.
Love it. So I wanted to ask about TCA and
Mm-hmm.
your role with TCA. And recently, you just did an event with Cal Lutheran University, and in our discussions, one of the goals there was to help people in the community that are accredited investors learn about how they can get involved in their local community, the businesses that are there. I'm curious, you know, like with your own journey becoming an angel investor, how are you leveraging that to educate others in the community in how they can play a role in their local economy?
It's a great question. So first of all, we had a great event at Cal Lutheran Hub 101. Really good attendance and fantastic questions to our panels. I think at the end of the day, in my view at least, startups, drive innovation, future innovation. So if we look at our industry, everything that we use, whether it's a device or a gadget or a service, it was a brainchild of a individual who believed in something, had a fantastic mission, and really sort of worked to deliver it. And honestly, those individuals can't do it without the support of the individuals who support these startups. And so if you are, whatever you do right in the industry and you're qualified, sort of you can qualify as an investor. Startups, not only you give money, you provide advice and you provide connection, and it's not just about money. So engaging in the angel sort of networks and groups, not only you expand your own network, you learn a lot, which was a fantastic thing for me. My past life, I was focused in my own little world of sort of healthcare med device. And by joining the group, I was exposed to so many different business segments. I'm learning a lot from our members who come from different, background and experience. So as an investor, you can grow, right? We should never stop learning or become obsolete if we do. So, so for me, it's not only it's educational for me. I've expanded my network, and at the same time, hoping that I'm contributing to the startup ecosystem, not just from the money, but help, advice, and mentoring. So helping them getting sort of over some of the challenges they're facing, and it's about paying it forward. So yeah,
I
I don't know
love.
if that answered your question or not.
No,
But
no, yeah, it did, and I love the themes that you're touching on, and it's something that is recurring with most everyone that is a part of these office hours, the mentors and myself. It's about community and it's about inspiring people and educating them, but also your own self growth and that ability to continuously learn and kind of also keep things that you already have learned in the past fresh in your mind because you're able to work with others that aren't so experienced and help them
sure,
learn these new things or
sure.
reiterate these things that are very
Absolutely.
foundational and important. So it's very good to hear that. With the community side of things and the relationships that you build, a lot of founders especially, but also those that are trying to build a career, they often find themselves uncertain of their place in the world and their importance, and that leads them to be hesitant in reaching out to people like yourself for a conversation, not to pitch, but just to build that relationship with you, to ask for some feedback, some advice, which is invaluable at any stage. What sort of tips or personal experiences that you can share that will be helpful for others to feel less afraid to just simply try to talk to others in their community like yourself?
Yeah. Um, we had a event more recently with TCA team, and we had a speaker. He was a two-time, well, probably more than two times, but successful CEO, exited two companies. And one of the things he shared with us, and I wholeheartedly believe in this, it's about your determination, right? I mean, honestly, fear, hesitation is just a barrier for personal growth. Period. I don't care whether you're a founder or whatever. Just you know, uh, just putting limits on yourself is just barrier on growth, right? Don't be afraid. Jump in. You make mistakes, and that's how people learn. Um, you know, God knows how many mistakes I've made in my life from a professional, sort of talking about, yeah. And, yeah, as long as you learn from it and you fall down, okay. But you learn and you keep moving on. So I think determination, um, and, and understanding that sometimes, that can hold you back and can make you a little bit complacent. So to me, I sort of fear these two words: lack of determination and complacency, I think are sort of the enemy. So don't be afraid. Reach out to people. Most people want to help. I think, everybody wants to help. And there are great leaders in this community that you can reach out to. And if they don't, they can put you in touch with someone else. God knows how many times I've gone to places and I've talked to someone and they've connected me to someone else and, allowed me to sort of get whatever project I was, working on to move it forward. So I don't know if that answered your question, but honestly, it's about be fearful of complacency, I tell you, and be determined, right? Don't fear is not a good thing.
No, yeah, it definitely it's a good mindset to have and that awareness. And like you said, it's just fear. And what's the worst that can happen? Reaching out to someone like yourself, you
They
know?
can say, sorry, I can't help you, and you
Yeah,
move on.
yeah. And that's the beautiful thing about that determination is there's plenty of other people that are available that
Yeah,
can help you.
yeah,
And like you said too, maybe they're not the right person, but if they feel that determination, they feel that passion, and the other qualities of character that are going to endear you to someone, being respectful, being patient,
yeah,
demonstrating that willingness to learn and listen, right? Then there's a very good chance that they'll, like you said, point you in the direction of someone that they know that can be much more helpful to you. So these
yeah.
are all wonderful things that you've called attention to.
And I think just one thing, there's a difference between determination and being aggressive, right? So there are two different things, right? So sometimes if you, um, just make sure determination is that you believe in yourself, you believe in the work you do, you're determined to learn and move on. But you also pointed out, approach it with the respect for the other person, be patient, and more importantly, listen. If you're reaching out to someone for feedback, then listen to what they're telling you, right? Don't have preset um, thoughts in your mind that you want to argue against with the individual that you're reaching out. So I
Yeah.
call it be an active listener. So yeah.
Yes. Yes. That yeah, it's very important, and like in these communities online, in different networking events and such, where investors are available, either on a speaker panel or just in the crowd. I see it all the time, and I'm sure you do too. And I'd like to hear a little bit more of your own opinions and advice in regards to this as we build on it. Founders rushing to pitch to investors and being aggressive and just just being like, I'm working on this, here's my thing, I want you to give me money. Like, what are your experiences dealing with people in these situations, and how would you advise them to take a different approach to connecting with investors and eventually pitching?
Uh, well, so one of the things I usually let sort of founders know, you know, looking for money is a two-way street, right? You need to do, as a founder, you need to do your homework to make sure that you're identifying the right VC or angel groups that are a good fit for you, right? So just cold pitching to everybody, if they're maybe they're not, they don't invest in the segment that your product is, right? Do your homework and make sure that you have a good fit as far as where you're targeting. But at the end of the day, it's sort of just doing a cold introduction. You're not pitching, right? You're introducing yourself. It's a good idea to ask questions, right? Learn, make sure you're making a good impression, right? First impression on somebody who knows what they're working on, what they're doing, why is it important? Because at the end of the day, at least most angel groups, right, they come in early in the sort of journey of a startup. And if you ask most angel groups or individual investors, the first thing they look at is the team, right? The founder, the CEO, and the team. So, yeah. So I don't know. Hopefully, I answered your question. But
No, no, absolutely. And yeah, that's where a lot of people kind of get a little confused on the two different things. They overlook that it's a matchmaking process, and it's integral for them to understand who they are and what their company is and the product and service, the market, industry, who they're servicing, and all of that before they should be trying to find the most suitable match in an investor or even like a co-founder or new hires or anything else. It's all matchmaking, right? And
okay.
then, like you're saying, it's not about pitching, it's about simply introducing yourself and getting to know these people first and
Yeah.
asking those questions.
Yeah.
um, I'm building on this. um, when it comes to the matchmaking, that foundation, what key factors do you recommend founders really hone in on first in that self identity of, you know, who they are before they take the next step to find a match in an investor?
Are you talking about the founder themselves?
Yeah, the founders themselves, like the founders going to take the next step to go and try to find investors for their company. How would you suggest they first, start to assess, their deal that they're going to put together in
Ah,
order to find
oh,
the best
I see.
investor?
I see. Um, well, I mean, basics, I think that's a huge question. So, but the basics are you truly what is the problem you're solving, right? And is your solution really sort of addressing that, and how you're differentiating your product, your service, versus what's out there in the market? Because honestly, outside the team, if you can't answer this question really clearly, um, maybe you're not ready yet, you're right, to talk to an investor. And then the other side of it is, I think most investors do look to make sure that there is more than one or two people that are working on this, right? So, who are your advisors? What are your experiences as a team, right? Is it a good diverse with different backgrounds, experience in past startups and exits? Even if the founder doesn't have it, do you have advisors that can sort of help you along that journey? I would think at least make sure you answer these. And then where are you in the sort of journey of the product? Um, Especially nowadays, I think it's getting tougher and tougher. Um, is you know assuming you're talking to an investor, right? So you're asking money, they want to see some level of traction. Have you done some sort of initial market evaluation with some customers and feedback, right? So I think those, but definitely it's like, what problem are you solving, and are you really addressing the gap in the market, and how you're differentiating yourself? I think those are keys outside the team. So
Yeah, I appreciate that. Building on that too, it'd be wonderful to get, and you don't have to get into too many details, like keep it high level, of course, but with yourself as an angel investor or TCA, group of investors, can you help founders understand a little bit more in regards to the due diligence process and
mhm.
what those factors are that matter the most to investors in this current climate when you're
Yeah.
trying to, yeah, compare different deals and figure out which one you want to bet on if there's like similar ones that are in front of you.
Well, typically, we're going to go typically, right? The process is you apply to be considered, right? So, for example, for Tech Coast Angels, you apply online. There is a questionnaire. It's pretty easy, actually. You upload your pitch deck, and then some additional questions you answer. Then we have a committee that reviews those applications. We have a guideline, and I'll talk to that a little bit, based on what we see. And if they think you at least meet those minimum guidelines, they invite you to a pre-screening where you're pitching to a selected number of members. You have a short pitch, some Q&A, and then members decide if they think it's a good fit for their larger organization. We're over 100 members, so in LA. So are you a good fit for the larger organization to hear your pitch? And then we'll schedule you. You come, you pitch. Again, it's a little bit of a longer pitch, some Q&A, and then we take a vote. And if we have enough votes, we move you to the first step of due diligence. The first step of due diligence is some of the questions that we thought were not answered at this screening. We do a deeper dive. And then if we like the answers, or everybody is still on board and interested, then we start the official due diligence process. Due diligence process typically takes about, I would say, 4 to 8 weeks. It depends on the startup and where they are. And we have a questionnaire. We want to understand, the background, more detailed background of the business. Some We do a deep dive into your cap table, into your financials. Um, if you're a service or a product, if you've already in the market, we want to talk to some references and potential customers. And let me see, and sort of do a reference check. We do some market analysis. We do a deep dive into your go-to-market marketing plan, you know, commercialization plan. If it's an IP, of course, we like to see some level of moat. We do a deeper dive into that. So there is a list we provide that, make sure you have all of these are ready. And typically, if you're going to a due diligence, whether it's with TCA or anybody else, make sure you have created a deal room very clearly. It's about your financials, your IP, your go-to-market marketing, your product development, manufacturing process, all of these things that will come up as part of the Q&A. Have those ready so that investors are looking at those, reviewing these, and then they come back with, questions to as a follow-up. So as a minimum guideline to be considered, I think I mentioned, again, depends on the segment. For healthcare, we want to see some level of validated prototype. If it's a drug, at least, some animal studies, preferably GLP studies completed. But for others, if it's a SaaS or a tech, we need for SaaS, definitely at least some level of market adoption, even if it's minimum revenue or good sort of initial evaluation, sort of customers like, and if it's even a free, that you have a good traction and retention. We want to see a proper team, so not just one or two people. I mentioned, what problem are you solving? And is this really a problem? And is your solution really differentiated? Do you have a moat? And then, we do look at, especially in today's market, we do look at valuation. Are you, versus where you are in your journey? Does it make sense? So those are things that probably gets you the first step in front of the investors. And when you pitch, if we feel certain gaps, we give a guideline, right? We want people to be successful. So we say, make sure you cover this in your pitch, or what are your deal terms? Make sure you're clear, or make sure you share your milestone or your competitive advantage. We do give feedback if we see a gap in the presentation, the first round. So that when startups come in front of the larger members, they're better prepared to pitch. So.
I think that's fantastic, and like a huge service to the community of entrepreneurs and founders for sure, to help them, yeah, get that insight, get that guidance to, as you said, be successful.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I wish that more investors and investment groups did that. It would be incredibly beneficial to the communities that they serve. But yeah, those are, yeah, very deep, wonderful insights. I'm curious. Well, real quick, hang on. Let me touch base with people that are watching. Some new people joining in on LinkedIn. Yeah, so those of us just joining, please use the text chat to ask any questions or share what you're working on, so Parisa can answer your question or give feedback, advice, insights related to your project. William, Boyne, if either of you two would like to come up on stage over here on Start Motto, yeah, raise your hand or let me know in text chat. You can also ask questions in chat and I'll relay them. So please don't be shy while we continue to wait for people to be bold and ask some questions. Yeah, Parisa, I'm curious, let's jump to the other side real quick. If anyone happens to be an accredited investor listening, watching,
Mm-hmm.
I would love to hear, your insights in regards to how, again, they can get involved in becoming an angel investor, but also
Mm-hmm.
what are some tips or best practice that you suggest in regards to how they seek out deals and evaluate those and get the highest chance of seeing success with where they're putting their money?
Well, I'm not going to answer the last one because I mean, honestly, it's
Yeah.
a startup world. It's tough, right? So, as investors, especially in early phase companies, right? You understand you should go in anything you do with sort of eyes wide open, right? There is always a risk because you're investing in startup in early stages, and there is an unfortunate failure, high level of failure percentage. So that's the reality of it. I think the value of joining a group rather than you as an individual just investing is what I mentioned earlier. I mean, when I retired, I my goal was to pay it forward and sort of engage in the startup ecosystem. And sort of when I did my research, Tech Angels popped out a lot. Number one, you could see the tenure of the members. Many members have been with TCA for a long time, and that sort of speaks. It's like part of a company, right? You have high retention means the company is doing good things. So you have members with long tenure, and the most important thing is that the value of being part of a sort of an angel group organization is that you can actually benefit from member experiences, right? Some of them have been longer. They see things. We're doing due diligence together. It's not an individual due diligence, right? We have a deal team that works on the due diligence, and as part of that, there is a lot of training. So we have a lot of webinars. You have access to the Angel Association Network, where there are a lot of free webinars on angel investing, how to look at due diligence, term sheets, all of those things. There is, if you enjoy learning, it's fantastic opportunity to sort of get exposed to this. So yeah, I mean, to me, being able to utilize other member experiences in the deals that they worked on, which was successful, and the deals they didn't work on, and some of the questions, sometimes as a newcomer, you assume certain things, and then some members are more experienced members are asking questions that sort of, yeah, that makes sense, right? So, yeah, so hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, it definitely helps for sure. And yeah, again, it goes back to community and leaning on others for support, especially when you're first, you know, dipping your toes into something that you don't have a lot of experience with. And on both sides, founder, investor, the ability to have that humility, that humbleness to listen and let go of your biases, or these ideas in your head that may not be quite correct or built on certain experience you had that don't translate quite well to different contexts, whether it's like a different market, a different industry for these different startups that you're looking at, or
Yep.
some other situation, right? So
Yep.
it's all very insightful and wonderful.
Yep. Don't
Marissa.
be afraid to ask stupid questions. So
Yeah.
never.
Yes, and again,
At
what's the
least what
worst?
you think is a stupid question.
Yes,
There is no
again,
such thing.
what's the worst thing happen, right? Like
Yeah. You get
you
an answer.
exactly. Yes. Yes, Marissa, great to see you here. Yeah, feel free if you want to raise your hand or let me know bringing you up on stage. You can use your microphone to ask questions, cam optional, or you could also use the text chat to post any questions or share what you got going on. But yeah, great to have you here. Those of you again joining on YouTube, Twitch, LinkedIn, same deal. Use the text chat to post some questions, and I'll relay them to Parisa. Let's see. Hey, what up? Nice. Yes, perfect. Okay. Yes, where to go from here as I'm scanning some things. Um, oh, yeah. So, Prisa, with your background, especially in the sciences, I'm curious, what sort of methodologies have been translatable or transferable, I should say, transferable skills that you've found yourself applying in these different roles, whether that's career professional, founder, investor, or now advisor, board of governor member. You've got a long list of different titles at this stage, which is wonderful. But yeah, I'm really curious, like what have been the most transferable skills that you've found yourself utilizing consistently?
Well, you know, I- I guess I'm an analytical person by nature. So, um, and good or bad, I'm very process oriented. Um, so I tend to, and I don't, I like to learn about things sort of deep, not just the surface. So, how I approach it is really sort of trying to dig deep into, if I'm really interested in something, and I'm sort of trying to dig deep, really understand the process and how things come together and if it actually makes sense, right? So it could be as simple as looking at a deal and some of the milestones and timeline they have and really digging deep to understand, okay, what needs to go in order to achieve each milestone, and does it actually even feel realistic of what the founder is talking about. And sometimes giving a feedback to the founder that says, I know you think you can do this in 6 months, but realistically this is going to take you at least a year and a half to accomplish, with resources and funding or whatever you have. So, but yeah, I think it, to me, and I've been sort of managing organizations for a long time, so it's sort of interaction with people, and I've done a little bit of everything. So just different understanding, different functions, has been very helpful for me. So
Like when you say, you like to dig in, I think that's really important, and it's something again that a lot of people in general overlook. It's establishing not just the correct context, but as much context as possible around whatever given situation
yeah.
you're in or evaluating, which is so important. And then something else that you call attention to, which is really important, especially for the founders, is how they build these projections and these expectations, these timelines, right? And often, I'm sure, again, you see it all the time, I see it all the time, they are not being as realistic or conservative as they should be, given the nature, especially early stage, of how many assumptions they still are operating within, and how likely they are to come across outcomes that don't align with those assumptions, and then the number of different hurdles or challenges that are going to result, the different amounts of adversity. So I'm curious, when you're looking at projections, you're looking at roadmaps, and you said, like you kind of touched on this, but again, what sort of advice would you give, and like how does it impact your judgment in deciding to do a deal or not when you see a roadmap, a projection that is that hockey stick curve versus something that is a little bit longer out, longer before it starts to curve up. Yeah, I'd love to hear more thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy for me to sit here as an investor, and you know, I know it's tough for founders to raise money, and they need to show a projection and a huge opportunity. But honestly, there is a difference between being um, aggressive in your assumption, right? And just being unrealistic, right? You can't go from 1 million in revenue to, I don't know, 25 million in revenue in 1 year, right? When you start doing that and putting that kind of financial projection in front of an investor, they're never going to take you seriously. Um, so I think you have to be mindful. You have to be aggressive in your assumption, but there has to be some realistic numbers or assumption behind it, because assuming investors are interested and now you're going through a due diligence, they're going to dig deep into that assumption of revenue. Okay, you're now at 1 million. You think you're going to do, I don't know, 10 million. Talk to me about how many customers, how many products, whatever that that assumption is. Walk me through that, and what level of investment is required to take you from here to here. So if you need $5 million of investment and you're raising 1 million, well, you're definitely not going to get there. So you do have to be um, aspirational, right, in your growth and where you think, but there has to definitely be proper assumptions behind where how you're going to get there. um, so, and that's why actually And once you go into a due diligence, investors spend a lot of time in on your financials and your projections and go to market and your burn rate and how many people is it going to take you to go from year one to all of this. There's going to be a lot more um, discussion and Q&A with the founder. So, and if we realize that you really haven't put much thought into this, then everybody's going to step back and sort of pens down. Or um, if you really haven't, so one of the things we give the founders is a sort of a chart risk and mitigations, right? If you really haven't thought about potential risk in every aspect, whether it's your go-to-market, IP, or product development, anything else, global, macro dynamics, which could be a factor for some startups in today's environment. But if you haven't really thought about those, and you really don't have a good answer, that tells us that there is a risk that you're really not thinking about your journey, at least between what you're raising now and your next milestone. And that could be a red flag for investors, that they sort of step back.
Love the answer. It's so good. We have a question from William Love. William Love asked, "Deep diving is controversial in corporate America. If you encourage this, how do you encourage this in corporate culture?"
I came from a corporate culture, and honestly, deep diving is a requirement. You really need to understand your numbers, your processes, how you get to a number, why whatever assumptions didn't work. And if you give cookie cut answers, that's not going to cut it. So um, if you are a functional leader in corporate America, you really need to understand your numbers and your business and the macro and the micro environment that affect your business. That's a must, not a nice to have. So,
If someone finds themselves in a situation where, you know, their corporate culture isn't in alignment with that, what are the in your opinion the best practices to help them realize that they're making a mistake and change their way of thinking and culture?
well, I don't know how to answer your question, but I would tell you that if you don't understand things well enough, how can you improve it, or how can you make a change, right? Because when you make a change, or process improvement, product improvement, whatever, continuous improvement should be way of life for any company. I don't care what stage you're in. um, but if you don't understand the product, your customers, your services, you really don't have a good understanding of that, how can you make it better? How can you improve it? How can you do that? Um, so if a company is really not interested in understanding, maybe it's becoming a little bit complacent, which goes back to my original, which is a nail of, what is it, coffin, in your coffin. You're not going to be successful as a company for much longer.
Um, Sorry, my brain. There's lots of different ways to go in this, but I'm curious. Yeah, while we wait for more questions, thank you, William, for contributing.
Thank you,
Um,
William.
yes, but yeah, everyone else
Good
that's
question.
tuning in and joining us. Yeah, this is an opportunity for you to ask Parisa questions or share what you're working on, so you can get feedback, advice, insights that you may not have been aware of. So please use the text chats to post. Let's see what you got. And in the meantime, I'd like to ask a little bit more in your background with life sciences and medical devices and sciences. These are, much more capital heavy ventures than, building a software SaaS app. I'm curious, what sort of advice and best practices you have for the founders that are trying to move into those areas and get to the point where angel investors or angel groups like yours would see them as being, viable deals to do, because it takes a lot
Yeah.
to get to that point. So I'm curious, what do you suggest?
Yeah, it is very true. And while I know maybe today's environment is a little bit tougher, I highly recommend that before coming to angel investors, try to raise as much non-dilutive funding as possible to get you to a sort of a critical milestone, which helps you validate um, your sort of device or product that you have. Um, because I think I mentioned it earlier, typically, um, investors in these segments want to see some level of prototype, validated prototype, if it's a sort of a biopharma, some GLP studies completed, and especially if you have some level of non-dilutive funding, it's really a confirmation of your technology for investors because the grants, especially if it's NIH grant, have been reviewed and validated by peers, scientific peers that are understanding the value. IP is important. Even if it's not your own IP and you're licensing it, do you have an agreement in place? Do you have a robust agreement in place and what that looks like? And then I want to go back to the team. Unfortunately, in this segment, it is very important for the founder, um, CEO to have experience in the segment, right? They have the domain expertise. Um, and at least have advisors that have helped with previous exits or they have the right contacts and experience and connections. So I think those are critical as an early stage investor, things that they look at. But it also goes back again, especially in healthcare. Are you truly solving a problem, right? Just because you have something doesn't mean that it's going to be adopted by the community. Um, and are you really differentiated from what's out there? So
All right, I want to touch on the team. And again, given your experience as an advisor, how much weight do advisors carry with investors, and what are some of the biggest mistakes you've seen founders make with recruiting these investors and, or excuse me, advisors to their company, and what would you recommend in regards to best practices to avoid making these mistakes?
yeah, I think when you're sort of in the early phase stage, yes, you're limited by sort of the funds and how many headcounts you can add. Um, So, to me, at least, the role of advisors are very critical. It is never about the quantity of advisors. So, talking to a few people to say, "Can I just add you to my sort of slide deck to show?" I honestly think that's a wrong approach. But making sure that you have advisors that are willing to give you time, right? That's why they're on there, whether they're a technical advisor, commercial advisor, regulatory advisor, utilize them, right? And the other side, the advisor is willing to give you time to help you along the journey because you need to, investors evaluate how well the founder is utilizing the board or the advisor group they have in making sure that, they're sort of executing to their plan. So that would be my advice. Make sure there's a diversity. So if you have sort of technical or regulatory, depend on where you are in the journey of your startup, or if in your commercial you do have somebody that can help you along the way. And similar to board members, right? You have a diversity in your board that you're just not hearing your own voice over and over again in a board meeting, and you have people that are willing to be blunt and give you the advice that sometimes a founder needs to hear. So,
It's wonderful. Again, thank you for your awesome insights. Marissa Jones asks, I see that the TCA Angel Network has a place for founders to apply for funding or get connected to angels. Can you provide more information on how that works, what the process looks like, or any pro tips to get through the application process. And then Marissa also posted this in the chat. Click on this um, link from Carta that shows only 10% of pre-seed advisors receive 1% or more equity. Okay, so this is building on the advisor question. And then it's got a bunch of charts and fun stuff
Yeah,
showing
yeah,
this.
yeah. So actually application is pretty easy, especially now we have a new deal platform. So I think it asks you to upload your pitch deck, and based on the information on the pitch deck, it automatically populates a lot of information. But there are just some follow-up questions. Just make sure your application is complete, because our committees look at those response to those questions to decide to invite you or not, right? But also, before you apply, I think there is a guideline that tells you, okay, this is where TCA is, right? So we're at pre-seed seed stage. These are the some of the things we look at. And if you're not a good fit, you might not want to apply to TCA. But if you're meeting some of those criteria that's listed as part of the application, I highly recommend that you apply. And we usually do a review fairly quickly and get back to companies. Was that the question? Yeah. Did I answer the question?
Uh, yeah, Marissa's adding a little bit more in the text right now, or the text chat. But
Make
yeah,
sure you have a clear deal terms, right? That's clearly stated what your deal terms are. So what's your valuation? It's a post money saved, recover, whatever that is. Um, your progress today, the team members, how many, when was the company established? Make sure you answer all those questions that are as part of the application. So I think those are, I would say, don't miss out on those, because if it's blank, then people move on. So
all right, we'll wait and see what Marissa adds. But yes, again, so we're coming up on time. We got 10 minutes left. So those of you that are watching, last call for questions. Let's hear them. Come on. Don't squander this incredible opportunity to learn and grow. All right, Marissa asks a follow up. Any horizon on AI in evaluating decks? Ah.
yes, a very good question, very smart question. Thank you for that question. We are actually in the process of implementing that. And I saw on LinkedIn a while back, there were a couple of sort of AI apps that can help even founders, right? Make sure you upload your pitch deck and it provides you some of the gaps. So we are looking at that to implement as part of the initial application review. It's not fully implemented yet, but I would say in the next month or so that probably will help the investors. What I find, that things change all the time, investors do want to look at certain things, so they will use the AI, but they are still looking at how you're responding to the question. Because again, at the end of the day, we come in early and we really tend to look at the team and their experience um, a lot. So, yeah.
That's I'm. It's kind of like astounding, yeah, to me how quickly it's being
And just
adopted.
kind of, yeah, just one thing, Gary, I wanted to just go back on the question you asked about the life sciences, because the situation came up recently. When you're pitching to an investor, especially when it's not a sort of a segment specific, right? So like we are segment agnostic. Um, life sciences, it's early phase, so you have a lot of scientific data, but this is not an R&D pitch. Remember that, right? You need to make sure you have a summary of all the studies you've done with some key takeaway, because if the team is interested, they're going to do a deep dive into your science and the data and all of that. But when you're pitching, if you're pitching as if you're in a sort of a scientific environment and you're pitching, that actually not a good thing for investors, because they want to hear about everything, and don't do detailed study by study by study. Try to summarize all the studies you've done to date, some of the outcome and what's next, and have key takeaway from each study. rather than assume that in that 10-minute pitch, the investor has time to read all your conclusions. So, yeah.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot with different investors, but also when I'm running our pitch review workshops, that you got to remember that a pitch is a persuasive story, and it needs to be crafted for the audience that you're pitching to. So it really is, you know, relevant to them and exciting to them and all that. Marissa, real quickly, asked before she has to go, do you know how many apps you get per month or week? It's curious, yeah,
Oh,
the volume.
yeah. We get, good question. I think we get somewhere, I think it's now a little bit more, but we get about 80 applications a month. So we get over 1,000 applications on a yearly basis. So
To follow up with that, and Marissa, thanks for joining and asking some great
thank you,
questions.
Marissa. Great question.
Yeah, the volume, is that been going up or is that down given, you know, a number of different outside, you know, like factors with the world and, you know,
Yeah.
economics and everything? I'm just curious, like, you know, like how in, you know, the Los Angeles market, how has the volume been changing or not changing?
I can speak to probably till last year. I would say year over year, we were seeing much, every year we're seeing increased number of applications for sure. And we look at applications across US. So LA doesn't invest in companies outside US. So we're very sort of US specific, at least for now. And but yeah, every year we see at least, I would say, 5 to 10% increase, if not more. So
That's I think exciting to hear.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. Okay. William Love asks, what AI models are you seeing that are reliable for evaluation?
So we have done a little bit of a customized development with ChatGPT for our analysis. So ours is a little bit more customized, but I think there are a few out there from ChatGPT that is helping, like a pitch deck analyzer, and it gives you the basics, so it's not, you use it as a support, right? In my world, in the healthcare, we say AI assisted diagnostics, right? AI is not diagnosing; it's assisting the physician. So similar, right? These apps are assisted evaluators, so they're giving you some feedback, make sure it aligns with what it is and it makes sense. And I'm sure eventually it will be perfect, but today use it as a assistant tool. So, but I think the chat GDP ones are pretty good.
Yeah, we have comments from Twitch from Dr. Paxmore saying AI is very dumb. It will give you different answers based on your prompt. So yes, it's
Yeah,
yeah, you're right to be aware that yeah, it's just a tool. Be aware, yeah, and it says it can give you completely contradictive responses if you prompt it. It is useful though, but yeah,
yeah,
definitely be
it's a
aware.
tool. Yeah, but and you need to review it and make sure it makes sense, right? But also there are a lot of information out there for making sure you have a good pitch deck and you're covering, and so it just gives you, yeah, be caution like everything else, right? Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for the comments over on Twitch. Uh, all right. What time is it? We got a few minutes left. All right.
Oh,
So very last call. Last call, people. What do you got? If not, while we wait to see if someone sneaks something in. Parisa, I would love to, like, you know, hear from you. What's like, you know, the number one kind of mistake you see founders make, and what advice would you give them to help avoid this?
well, I guess it depends on the stage, right? If they're just doing a first pitch, I think you mentioned it. To me, I always advise, before you put your slide deck together, create your storyboard, right? What are you trying to tell us, and take us through that sort of journey, and make sure you cover key aspects of your startup, right? And so be prepared. Record yourself pitching, right? Watch your recording and video of yourself pitching. Be prepared for tough questions, right? Always know that most of these investors that are existing or past successful founders of startups, they've exited companies, they're executives, and they're hearing many, many pitches. So make sure, and they are sort of segment knowledgeable. So make sure you're ready to answer tough questions because it will come up, because you need to understand your segment, your product, your competition. Many times I've seen that our investors ask a startup or founder about their competitive landscape, and you know and unfortunately the founder doesn't know or doesn't have the right answer. So um, make I think make sure you understand um, who are truly competing with, right? If you're a startup, there are other startups in the segment maybe further along. You're not comparing yourself to a company who's already in commercialization and generating 50 100 million of revenue, especially when you're comparing exit, right? So sometimes we hear founders pitching and saying, I think we can easily get 100x because such and such a company exited at, I don't know, 500 million. Yeah, that company exited at 500 million, but they had probably 100 million of revenue when they exited. And you're not going to be able to exit with that kind of multiples when you're only at the 2 million revenue. So make sure you really understand those criteria because then it's about your credibility. So, yeah.
Yeah, we try to hone in on that a lot, and it goes back to context and establishing the correct context. It's something that see multiple times a day in these different communities, like, and thankfully I have a touch point in my own, but yeah, founders are consistently making these comparisons to other companies that are much further along without appropriately recognizing that those other companies, like you said, have a lot of different factors that may or may not exist between that company and their own, the
Mhm.
team, the market that they're operating in, the territory, different regulations that may be at play, different opportunities to acquire capital, non-dilutive capital through grants or other means, all these different things, and they so often make those comparisons, say, oh, because these other companies are so successful, we're going to be successful too, even though we don't have a product in the market yet. And, it's just me and my buddy, right? And it's
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh. So I really appreciate you again, like, bring these points to the forefront of hopefully, founders that are listening and allow them to avoid making those mistakes. Um,
Sure.
yeah. All right. So we're at time. Parisa, you're wonderful. I really appreciate you playing a role
Sure.
in this and helping us again get this going. Those that are watching, thank you so much for being a part of this and yeah, asking some really great questions. Parisa, do you have anything you want to share going on with your many different ventures that you're a part of that you
Mm.
want to let the community know about?
No, I would just say if you're interested as an investor, please join us at TCA. And to all the founders, I have to say thank you for everything you do. It's very easy for me to sit here and say, do this and do that. You guys are living it every day, and we truly appreciate you. You bring change to everyone's lives, in the future. And so don't give up, be determined, and march on. So thank you.
That's a lovely note to end on. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Parisa, for being a part of this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Take care.
Have a
Bye.
good